Hello everyone and welcome to episode 4 of the E-murging Artist. Today I'm going to be talking about giving and receiving feedback. Feedback is really important in the performing arts, and I would argue it's important in everything we do. So I'm really excited to bring this episode to you today and reflect and discuss on some of the issues around feedback and some of the things I wish I had processed before I am able to now today. If you're new to this podcast, I want to give you a warm welcome, and I want to encourage you to watch back and listen back to the 3 episodes, because in this series I'm talking about issues, challenges, and also mindset shifts that I hope are helpful for freelancers and for artists in general. So I do hope you resonate with some of the things that I say, and in general, I just wanted to open up a channel of communication, and I really hope that this serves as a discussion between friends. I have a lot of friends that are going through the same issues, and I just thought that this is a way to empower them and to show them that they're not alone in this, and you are not alone in this. Thanks for being here. Without further ado, in this episode, I will be talking about why feedback can be helpful, when is it helpful, and why it's not always important to give feedback, and also on the other side, what we can do when we receive feedback, how we can ask for it, what do we really mean when we say, I welcome feedback from anyone. And it's something that I have been struggling with a lot throughout the years. And I will be talking about my personal journey and my personal challenges around feedback. But I want to first start with what gave me the inspiration for this episode. And it was a few weeks ago, I was delivering a mindful movement session, and that was in person. So to give you a little bit of context, mindful movement is gentle movement via meditation, and I deliver these well-being sessions in companies and individually. So I was in a really big company, and these are people who are not dancers, who have no background in movement whatsoever. Maybe they're interested in well-being activities, maybe they occasionally do yoga, but basically that's it. So I was brought in to do a well-being session, and at the end of it, I always ask for feedback. And I'm at this point in my life and my career that I really mean it. I'm like, please give me feedback. There's no such thing as good or bad feedback. So please tell me openly what you thought about this session, how you felt, and any experiences that you would like to share with the group or myself. And I always give the chance to the participants to reach out to me later on, so they don't have to share with the group. So there's a sense of privacy. There was this woman that was a little bit hesitant, and I could tell she was afraid of maybe how I would take it. So she basically said that she couldn't hear my voice very well because, again, for context, these sessions are with eyes closed, so participants have their eyes closed, and my voice is what leads the session. And I speak quite quietly, naturally, but I also, in these sessions, they're very calming, so I don't tend to need to be really clear. I want people to hear me, but I don't want my voice to be imposing in this environment. And I always say in the introduction of the session that if you can't really hear what I'm saying, or if you can't fully understand what I'm saying, it doesn't matter, because what matters is your own interpretation through movement and through your own state of being at this point in time. So that was my initial instruction. And so this woman said that she couldn't hear me very well, and that she felt a little bit upset that she felt she was missing out on information on this session. And she said, "I'm sorry to give you this feedback." And I said, well, that's really valuable. I appreciate your experience, and I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to share that with me, because I really mean it. There's no such thing as bad feedback, and it's what you do with it. So that moment, and that was in front of a whole class, so every single one heard that woman's feedback. And I think my previous self would be really insecure about this interaction. I think I would have felt really, really bad about myself in this context. I would have felt maybe that I didn't do a good job with a session, or I would have empathized with her so much so that I would feel really disappointed for giving my time in something and then not really receiving what I thought I would be. But I'm really glad that through all this processing, all these years, I was able to really hear what she was saying. And this is the thing with feedback. Sometimes we want to hear something we already think about our work or about ourselves, and we have formed this idea that my work is XYZ and it's characterized by XYZ, and then I think that this is what it does to people. And then somebody comes over and say, actually, I felt really upset or, emotional or frustrated watching your piece or having your session. And then it really kills our ego. It doesn't meet our expectations, the expectations that we've set about ourselves, about our work. So going back to my example, I thanked her for her bravery of speaking up and really sharing her experience. I said that I'm going to try and facilitate everyone in the session and make sure that they all have access to the same information. And if my initial introduction was not clear enough, I would make sure to communicate it better next time. And there was something about, I think, my response to that, maybe not the exact words, but maybe my body language, maybe my honesty and my openness to feedback, that she felt she didn't have to defend herself, and she didn't even feel uncomfortable for sharing her thoughts. Because what I also skipped was that there was 5 more people that shared before her that said wonderful things about the session and their experience, and they were all really deeply moved, and they were sharing beautiful images and beautiful sensations that emerged throughout the session. So it was really, really positive. And then I think I understand why she was very hesitant to share, because everyone seemed to have had wonderful experiences, and she was the one that could potentially upset me, but she didn't. And I'm so glad she helped me improve, and she helped me, understand the needs of the people I serve better. This small introduction was only a little part of receiving feedback, and I realize I've started with receiving, not giving, because I think it's important to empathize with the people who are giving feedback first, to understand how we can be more helpful to others when we're asked for feedback, and sometimes how and why we should not give feedback at every point, at every stage. And I want to go back to the feedback in the arts, because today I will be talking about that specifically, and we'll be talking about feedback in artistic practice or artistic work. But of course, that's not to say that these don't apply to anything in life. So maybe you find something useful outside of this context. back to the arts now. I want to make 2 disclaimers before we move forward. It's really tricky to navigate feedback because art is really subjective. So we have to consider a lot of things, a lot of points before we can sort of safely say that I am entitled or safe to give you feedback that will be helpful for your development. So it's highly subjective. We have to consider our biases, our aesthetics, our emotions, our backgrounds, our artistic kind of education, our training. So there's so many things that play a very, very significant role when we're looking at art, when we're experiencing art. It's also maybe our relationship with the artist itself, because artists are really connected to their work and vice versa. So there's so many things that play a role in this kind of process. This is also the beauty of art, isn't it? That it is subjective and there's an audience for everything and everyone. But why feedback is important as well when we're asked for it, and I really, really argue about this. Like, I want to make a point about how somebody asks you for feedback or you just giving it and why. But that's on the second part of this episode. So I think feedback is really important because it supports growth and it shows maybe indications for further development or areas of, I don't really want to use the word improvement, but I will just say, indications for maybe further experimenting or expanding or investigating. I feel that these are more suitable words for what we're going for, and I think language really matters in this context. Now, since I started this episode backwards, I'm going to share with you my views on receiving feedback. And actually, I think it'll be helpful if we go back to my example and try to break down the steps that I took. And I want you as well to think about how you would react in this situation. So the first thing was that it was in a very, very sort of vulnerable context for me, because mindful movement is my own practice. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I always want to do better, and I want people to take the full benefits. So I'm very, very emotionally attached to that practice. And it's also difficult for me because I go to different companies and I go to different environments, and especially environments that people are not familiar with me or my work, so they don't have history, and most likely they won't have a background in movement and a background in well-being activities. So this would be their first interaction with a similar practice. So already I feel very vulnerable because I have a lot of things to consider. But I always approach this with gratitude for being given the opportunity to share my practice with more people, and also with just the joy of being in a space with people and sharing this beautiful space and time and opportunity to just experience something together. And throughout the years, I have kind of practiced how much I can expect from myself and from others, because I always say to myself, I can do my best, I can bring my best intentions in the room, I can bring my absolute best self, but because this is a live practice and we're many people in the same room with different moods, different backgrounds, different experiences, you can only do what you can do. So I'm trying to manage my expectations there, but my intentions are always really good. So in this vulnerable context, I always ask for feedback after the session. I'm asking for feedback because I really want to improve everyone's experience. And I want to make sure that my intention is being clearly communicated. And in the end, it works. That's why I'm asking for feedback. I'm not asking for feedback so that people can clap or they can tell me how great I am, or, they can boost my ego. And, well, they do boost my ego accidentally when they are having a great experience and they're talking about my work in a very positive way. But that is just a nice byproduct of why I'm asking for their feedback. The plan is, and the goal is, to make sure that what I am thinking and what I'm planning and what I am wishing for is working. And if it's not, what can I change? And if it's still working, what can I do better? And how can I expand their experience? So, number one, it's really important to understand why you are asking for feedback, to make sure how you receive it. So when I asked this class after the session, please give me any feedback you have. And it doesn't matter if it sounds good or bad in your head. Anything, I'm open to anything. I was ready to hear what they have to say. And that is really, really crucial. I did not interrupt that woman. I could tell from her body language and her kind of hesitation to speak that it wasn't going to be, a raving about the session kind of feedback or sharing. So I did not interrupt. I did not try to justify myself or, make up an excuse about why I was being quiet or make it about her, because that would have put her in a really, really uncomfortable position. And I, as audience, have been put in that position in the past. It is not pleasant. I could have said a million things about why my voice was quiet or why she could not hear me, but that was not even the point. So I did not interrupt her. I let her openly share what she thought. And what I said to her first thing was, thank you for sharing, because I know it takes courage to do so, especially in a room with many, many people. So I validated her experience. And, if that was her experience, because we all feel different things and we all experience things differently, who am I to say that was not it? You couldn't hear. No, she couldn't hear. And that's perfectly valid. And that's her own journey. So I validated her experience. I said, I really value the fact that you're speaking up. And can you suggest what I can do better? And I also reflected on the spot and I said, next time I will make sure that in the introduction, I reiterate the fact that you don't have to listen to me all the time and you don't have to follow word by word what I'm doing. So I think I gave her a resolution by reflecting on what she said and by kind of putting the work and the effort into making it better for her and for everyone else next time. So this was a really pleasant interaction in the end. And I think everyone, do you have this experience of like someone saying something bad or like something not so positive and everyone's kind of on edge, watching and waiting for you to speak to see how you'll handle it, how you'll react to that? And I think the whole room just felt really calm after this. And they were all very supportive. And I think thinking back at this interaction, it really shows confidence in not being perfect. I realized that was a really weird thing to say. Let's unpack that. What I mean by that is that I know I'm not perfect, my work isn't perfect, my practice isn't perfect, but I am confident in always trying to improve and always being open to expanding and growing and to developing what I'm doing. So that's why this interaction of receiving feedback made me feel so great, because it also validated the fact that I don't feel insecure about how feedback is going to affect me anymore. I do have a couple of instances still that have managed to kind of creep in and kind of made me feel uncomfortable for a couple of minutes. But then I was able to bring back the framework that I'm talking to you about today. And I understood that the person who gave me the feedback, their intention was maybe to make me feel uncomfortable, and they managed that for a couple of minutes. And that brings me to the second part of this episode. Giving feedback, especially in the art world, can feel a bit intimidating for both creators and audiences. And I'm sure as an artist, you've been to things as audience, or you've been to our friends, because we all have the same friends. What I meant to say is that we go to our favorite people's things, and sometimes they're not that great or could be better, or, all of that. And if you're anything like me, I might find the words, but my face says a different story, and that is a little bit difficult. And if you are a friend of mine and I've been to your show and I didn't love it, I want you to know that I still appreciate you making the word, and I'm really sorry about my face. Okay, now let's get serious for a second. So, giving feedback is a responsibility, and I've changed my mind so many times over the years, because the number one thing I value is honesty, and I really cannot see it in myself to go somewhere and say that I loved something and I didn't, because I don't think I do justice to the person who worked for it. However, number one question I ask myself, and I encourage you to ask yourselves too, is, did this person ask me for feedback in the first place? Because if they didn't, if they're, for example, presenting a new show, a new work, and they didn't ask for feedback, or they said the even awkward one right after the show, what did you think? Do you have friends that have done that? I'm sure you have. And I need to recognize that this is not the time to give feedback. This question, what did you think, right after a new show, is not time for feedback. It's a question of encouragement, of, well done, my friend. You've done the work, your show is out there. It has been seen and experienced by members of public, and I'm so proud of you for putting in the work, for making the effort, especially in this climate, especially in this very, very challenging times. This is what that question is for. So, moving on from that question, if someone has not asked you for feedback, really consider not giving it. Because maybe they're not ready to hear what you think. Maybe they're not interested in hearing what you have to say. And it's very, very rare. And you have to know the relationship really deeply to know when it's time to give feedback if you haven't been asked for it. In another scenario, let's say you are part of an R&D group, research and development, or you have friends who are developing work and you are asked to go and see a preview and give feedback. a few things cross my mind in this process, because I have been asked to do that in the past many times. I have mentored artists that are working on their own stuff. I am working as a guest lecturer, so I have to interact with students when they're presenting their shows or their projects. So there's many instances that I have had to give formal or informal feedback. So what goes on in my mind is, if you say something with respect and empathy, I think it's gonna land way better than just you saying what you think. So you need to consider the responsibility you have and the power you have in that position. So if you look at power dynamics of the giver and receiver of feedback, you will understand that giving feedback puts you in a much higher position of power, because it's your opinion that's being valued at that point. So I really wanted to try and understand that, and I am kind of, as I reflect on it, I'm trying to unpack that for myself. The second one is that we need to approach giving feedback with more respect and more empathy for the person who has done the work and who is putting themselves to a very vulnerable position of being open to it. Because you need to be in a very certain state of being to be open to maybe some criticism, maybe some negative comments in your head read as negative, and maybe some things to be changed or to be tweaked. So the other person is being in a vulnerable position, and they need to feel safe, and they need to feel that they're valued, and you have the best intentions in understanding them and in kind of supporting them in what they're doing. The third one is that it's really helpful to put yourself in the other person's shoes. So I usually ask a lot of questions before I give feedback, actually, because I want to understand their intentions, their background, maybe not in terms of like their cultural background, if that's not something they want to share, but definitely their artistic influences, their world of aesthetics. What is it they're trying to create? What is it that they're trying to evoke to the audience? And then I will respond accordingly. So maybe as an experiencer of the work, maybe as a member of the audience, was that communicated clearly to me? Did I feel? Did I sense? Did I experience? Another thing that I would like to highlight is that language really matters. Words really matter. So please choose your words wisely, or as I've done in my case, because I'm not a native speaker, and sometimes I would say something that thinking back would not have been the perfect way of articulating what I meant to say. I have worked on, and I'm still actually working on finding the right language and the right words to express that still remain open. They're still expressing what I mean to say, but they're also kind of filled with compassion and filled with kindness and support for the other person. For example, if maybe previously I would say this was not really effective for XYZ, and XYZ being the artist's intention. Nowadays, I would frame this totally different, and maybe I would even shift the statements into questions. So I would say, how do you think you would be able to evoke XYZ, so that I make this more of a space for the other person to reflect on their work rather than me telling them what they should be thinking. Which, I mean, in what universe is that ever right? So I really love this kind of giving feedback process to be an open conversation and maybe a provocation for some things. And I always try to frame it as, if it's helpful, this is what my reflection is. But it might be not helpful for you, and it might not be helpful right now, because a lot of the things that we review and we kind of experience are very, very work in progress pieces. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning that timing is really important. So I would be really cautious of giving feedback in the very early development stages of a work, because it's an even more vulnerable stage unless I'm being brought in as an expert. And I cringe a little bit at that, but I mean, if I'm brought in as a consultant in choreography or a creative consultant, or in that kind of, more zoomed out role to look at a piece, I will try to only give a few pointers that I think they would drive the piece forward, and only that. And I would be extremely careful with language, with timing, and with the things that I'm sharing, because if I think and if I see that the piece is going somewhere on its own, and I think it's going to get where I would envision it to, or sometimes I even leave it to surprise me, which is even better, but I would have the patience in myself as an external eye to leave the team, do their thing, be awesome, do the work, and then rediscover it. So I will hold back on that, on a few things. I am really passionate about feedback, as you may be able to tell by this episode. Thank you so much for listening and for being here with me. And of course, I cannot leave you without a bonus to this episode. I would love to hear from you, and I will give you a moment to reflect on that. I want you to think about a moment that you received feedback that made you uncomfortable, and I'm sure you remember that, and see if you can unpack that interaction with the tools that I shared and the points that I shared in this episode. And I want you to also reflect on what you would have done differently if you were to have that interaction again and to receive that kind of feedback again. There's something really empowering in embracing feedback. I hope you can resonate with it, and I hope that you feel more equipped to have these interactions moving forward. Thank you so much. I'm Iris, this is the E-murging Artist, and I will see you in the next episode.